Thanks for joining me back in the garage this week. When last we were together, we were in the process of putting together, or at least gluing up, our Asian-inspired hybrid recurve bow here. And this week, we're going to go through taking it out of the mold and really encountering a rather unfortunate occurrence with regard to some of the glue up results that we got, and I'm going to kind of take you through some of that. I have in my hands a workable blank, so this is where we ended up as a result of correcting some of the issues that I came across, but it was a little bit of a challenge, and I will tell you that it can be a little tricky sometimes to get really good tight glue lines. There's a lot to do in advance to ensure that you don't encounter the kinds of problems that I did. And truthfully, this video is really one of those things that's a retrospective and kind of help you to look back on the way we did things in the glue up and do it better than I gave the example of. In any event, let's get right to it. I'm going to show you what I did to get this this bow blank ready to go. Fresh out of the mold, you guys, or out of the wraps, here is our hybrid recurve bow set out on the bench top here. I think I got some pretty decent, I mean, on initial observation, here's what I see. We've got good, what appears to be pretty good glue lines at the fades of the riser. Here is, well, and good shape, I guess, right? It seems to be relatively symmetrical. I think I've got a little bit deeper curve in here and a little more elongated curve on here, so we might have to do a little bit of heat correction on that. We'll see how things progress, but here is my problem. So when I was dry fitting this together, I could see that it was gapping on this belly piece, and it is like you can see through there is no glue adhesion here whatsoever, and it's on both ends. One's a little more extreme than the other, but it's bad on both. Here's the saving grace in this scenario. This is not intended to bend at all. So our any flex in the limb should be ending right about in here. So long as we've got good glue lines, good adhesion up through the flexing piece of the limb, I should be able to do some repair work in here. So I don't know if that's going to be just filling that void with epoxy. I really don't think I'm going to like cut it out and reattach. I don't think that's gonna work. I just think I'm gonna fill it with epoxy and call it good. Next time around, I will have clamps here, you know, on down the way to ensure that I've got a good glue line, because we did get a good glue adhesion from the belly to the core. We just didn't do very well with the back to the core. So that is all I see with this initial glue up. I think I'm going to get the plastic off, get the excess glue cleaned up on there. Okay, I've gotten most of the plastic off of the front, or the belly and the back sides here. I'm not going to be able to get it off the edges too well because it's all coated in glue. But I wanted to give just a view here of our tips and how well they're lined up. It does just set, you know, flat along the whole plane here of the top of my workbench. So from here, guys, I'm gonna go ahead and just take and run through my bandsaw at the tips and remove the excess of that core piece out of there, and then grind up these edges to a smooth surface so we can see just exactly what we're dealing with in this blank. All right, I've got things pretty well cleaned up along the length of this blank. you can see that we've got just a little bit of, I don't know, a little more to grind down to get even through the riser side. And when you look at it like this, then turn it over, you can see that the risers in there just kind of, just barely askew. So we'll take that down. We got plenty of room here to work with to take this grip down and expose all of that riser piece. So no big deal right here. Did get pretty good glue lines. I'm at least satisfied with this. This is not going to cause any kind of issue here. Mentioned that I had some issues at the tips of the bow in the recurves, and this troubles me a little bit in that it's out here into the section of the limb that may still be stressed some in terms of taking some flex. However, when I put a clamp to it, it will not budge. It won't close. It won't do anything other than just exist the way it is. It's good on this side. So, you know, I think that's one of these, it's just kind of a void on the edge, and I will fill it with some more epoxy and call it good. The remainder of the recurve here looks pretty good on this side. Lots of opportunity on this side. I mean, that looks pretty rough, but not too big of a deal in reality, because we're not going to bend in here. We can just load this full of epoxy and call it good. You know, I mean, it's just not going to bend, and so we shouldn't have too much of an issue right there as far as delamination is concerned. Now, the other end here is a completely different story. You can see that this is opened up almost through the entire elbow of that recurve. We got pretty good glue line up to, you know, up to the flexing portion of the limb. But this is an awful lot to open up right here. And as if this view didn't look bad enough, this is even worse. Absolutely, this is bordering on disaster. And, you know, looking at it from retrospect, had I just put clamps along the length of that jig, I would have never had to deal with any of this. I should have known better when I did my dry setup, and it was opening up right here, that I needed to have additional clamping pressure on this elbow. I mean, guys, you can see clean through that limb. And not only can you see through it, you can tell that it has actually done a little bit of delaminating. It was never laminated in the first place, but it's starting to separate a bit. So to make this even more complicated, so here's the coal that we used when we glued everything up. So you can see how well this particular recurve sits in that mold. But if you take it to the other side here, it's clearly evident that as a result of this and the separation that has occurred, some of that recurve has pulled out. I don't even know what to say outside of, if I were doing this bow without having filmed a couple installments already, I'd just abandon it. All right, so trying to contemplate exactly how I'm going to go about filling this gap that you can see clean through. Something I was doing as I'm trying to clean it up is I got a hacksaw blade inside here, and I was just trying to scuff everything up really good so that I could get a little better adhesion with my epoxy when I went to fill this void, and I'm looking at it and I'm thinking to myself, I have like 2 inches at most of actual contact, you know, good glue line right here. Maybe 2 inches. And as I was working the hacksaw in here and cleaning stuff out, you know, it just really, the more I was messing with it, the more I'm thinking, I want to just cut that through. I mean, we could fill this, but I think the percentage of success with that's going to be low, especially when we can do it right. I mean, why stop short of just 2 inches here? I can take that out. I would go back in then and put in a filler piece, you know, that would kind of take up the saw kerf. So where I get a saw kerf in here, I'll fill that back in with an extra piece of wood, and then get a nice clean glue up here. As clean as I can get it up in here anyway, because that's not very clean, as you can see. And I may need to run my filler all the way up to that point and then run it out. So I might be just a tad thicker on this side, but again, we're dealing with just static recurves, and this right here is a piece of hackberry, the weight of which is nominal in comparison probably to getting that full of epoxy. All right, I have managed to cut through that length right there at the very tip of the recurve, and you can see that the thickness has really been, well, it's now thin on that piece of reinforcement that we had in place. Still full thickness over here, but we're going to augment that a little bit with our patch and get this up to speed. And so here's our piece, and we will glue this just right into place here. Like this. Oh, oops. It is very fragile. So gotta be very careful with it. But nevertheless, we'll push it down into the joint really good here, and then we'll put this back into, gosh, I'm having a hard time with the camera. We'll put this back into the mold the way it was and just glue it anew. All right, so there is the fix, and hopefully we can get a little tighter joint. I mean, it's not going to be super tight this time around because I've got a lot of jagged edges and old residue in there, but it's going to be far better than it was when we first pulled it out of the mold. Here is the dry run for the glue up that we're going to do here. Sorry, lights and shadow is not helping us much with seeing that. But if you flip over, kind of get a view here. That glue line is going to be much tighter than the original. And we are salvaging any lost sawn out or milled surface, because I had to get in there and sand it up really good and score it up with a hacksaw blade and whatnot to kind of give myself something to, or give the epoxy something to grab onto when we glue this joint together. So we'll use a little, we'll be very liberal with the glue. Try and get some good squeeze out on both sides so that there's nothing left to have to fill in that joint. And this should be, I think this will get us right back to ground zero. We can get moving with this bow again as if nothing had gone wrong with this particular recurve. All right, guys, I have removed this guy from the molds, or the singular mold, really. Cleaned up the joints really well. The far side that had the really wide open gap now looks like this. Used hackberries, so the wood is very, very white, but you can see that the gapping that's occurring on the glue joint at this point is very minimal and should be a very reliable glue up at this point, so that we can be assured that as we start approaching full draw, we are not going to experience any failures in conjunction with a bad glue joint on this recurve here, or on this glue joint. So let me show you too. If we take the original cull or mold, you got just a little bit of a gapping going on here, but it holds that recurve pretty true. And if I take this over to the opposing side, now we got a very similar scenario here. So I am pretty satisfied that these recurves are pretty well identical, and we can expect that this is going to be a well-balanced bow with regard to the recurves and how they interact with the limbs. All right, so we have pretty much arrived at a suitable bow blank with which to continue on this project. You know, this might be useful to somebody out there, and hopefully you found some value in the video. If not a good muscle car pass. We'll see you guys next week.